My parliamentary colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. I don't think I will need 7 minutes to talk about a subject I know something about, because I'm from a big family of 11 children. That was at the start of that family's life, born the early children in a tent, and we know what poverty smells, tastes and feels like, and we never liked it. Now let me say the Salvation Army is to commend it for another State of the Nation survey, and thanks for being a key conscience to this country. The report doesn't pretend to have policy answers or solutions, but it is a valuable contribution to setting out, in quotes, what is so. The subtitle, She'll Be Right, sums up, in my view, the current economic nostrum for this country very aptly. But I remember an age when people said it would be right, or she'd be right, they meant it. And that's exactly what they delivered. They took this country from abject poverty and a Great Depression in one generation, the size of the UK, and gave it every modern facility, every university, schools, hospitals, district nurses, blanket nurses. They did it all in a country the size of the UK with a population the size of Manchester. And she was right. Back then, it meant something. Today, well, it's like so much that often you hear around the environment in which we so often operate. The rating of progress on a set of social indicators is a useful perspective. The picture is inevitably mixed. There has been a drop in teenage pregnancies, but there's been an increase in reported violence against children, and I do not believe for a moment the police figures, because if you do not have a proper police presence in any society, then the results will never be accurate. And they may boast, this present government, of putting online 600 extra police men and women, but it's nothing like the aggregate you will see per 100,000 population in other countries abroad. Less police means less reporting, so I don't believe those for a moment. Let me just say a few words about the term child poverty. Now, let's be honest. Children do not cause child poverty. They don't cause poverty, but they are the victims of it when it happens. Victims of a failure to provide decent jobs, a failure of parents, failures in education, and sometimes it can be an ethnic failure for failing to take responsibility for our own cultural problems, and I'm talking about the Maori world now, about which I know something. But above all, it's a serious failure in national economic policy. Trickle down, which we've been hearing all the way since 1984, how it will all happen somehow. Or a rising tide lifts all boats. Well, when's the tide going to start coming in? Because it's 2013, and then you get the best of all, the global financial crisis, which is an absolute lie. It was never a global financial crisis. It was a crisis of Western institutions, at the centre of which was New York and Wall Street. Outright venality, egregious self-interest, deceit, lies, cheating, all manufactured by the undue persuasion of Congress and parliamentarians in other parts of the world. And when it all happened, they then believed in a thing called the people's credit, something which they've been ridiculing since it first turned up in the speeches of John A. Lee way back in the late 20s and early 30s. All of a sudden, there was a thing called the people's credit because you could socialise your losses, having privatised all your benefits in the years before that. It's about a poverty of vision and a poverty of planning in a country with a vast exclusive economic zone, huge natural resources, and an abundance of new oil, which is water. And on top of this country has a marvellous climate. We took ourselves, with all our handicaps and thousands of miles away from our markets, to be number 2 in the world. We have lived this vision in the past, but we have forgotten it. And we've had all these new Pied Pipers from all parts of the country with their new vision, which the public has succumbed to, and no results, sadly, at all. Now, I say if we have to pick out one area of failure, it is serious, it is jobs, because employment relates to so many other indicators of social well-being as well, and by that I mean first-world jobs with first-world conditions. Something that we used to aspire to when we said we'd have a 40-hour week and one partner could look after a family, and the maximum income that would be required to service their housing needs would be 25%. Now we've got people paying 55, 60, some 70. So what future do our young people face? Well, frankly, when Mr. Key says he's aspirational, he must be talking about his immigration policy. Not his immigration policy, but the immigration one where the man called Swand, the Minister of Finance for Australia, looks after our unemployed. Now, there was a slight drop in the rate of unemployment from 7.3 to 6.9. But how could that possibly be true when you know that 1 hour's work puts you off the unemployment figures and into the employment figures? Why are we living with a damn right lie? We've got all these universities filled with political scientists and all sorts of analysts and qualitative theorists and quantitative theorists and what have you, and we can't even get that one fact right, that there is massive unemployment in this country. And if you look at, for example, Roy Morgan, they say it is well past 10%. They do an in-depth analysis. And then you get into the serious area where it's much, much worse because people are falling off the radar screen as though, for example, 16% Polynesian unemployment is not bad enough and 14% for Maori. I think it is much, much worse than that. And I remember a time way out in the country in a Maori settlement where every male had a job. And when the Minister for Labour knew every person on the unemployment register in New Zealand, not because he's a genius with a fantastic memory, because there wasn't 28,000 or 2,800, there was only 28 in total. And so I often wonder, what advance have we made with all this highly educated environment that we've got in Parliament, with all these people who are so much better educated than the people who led back then, when they took us from being a very poor country to being one of the greatest countries on earth for quite a long time. Can I just close by saying on this, hang on to the old nostrums and free market myths will not suffice. Tired old ideologies, the state can solve anything and everything, the market can solve everything, both are outdated. Go and look at Scandinavia. On any series of indicators, those 4 Scandinavian countries lead the world. And yet they are very hard on the dispersal of social welfare. They have a highly galvanised, organised social welfare system. But people have to qualify for it and perform. And yet, on an average, they take home 2.5 times more cash every week in their pocket than our people do. But of course, here we're obsessed with the rate of taxation. If you go to Africa, you won't find many countries in Africa talking about taxation. Because when you're only on $3 a day, taxation doesn't tend to be a problem. And we've been obsessed in this country with expenditure and taxation, and the one thing we're not obsessed with is that which every parent knows, mum and dad, that to get money for the family, you've got to expand money for your own family and offshore for the family in New Zealand. It's the reason why my party is obsessed with an outdated piece of legislation that was never appropriate for this country called the Reserve Bank Act. It does not serve our needs. We were an export-dependent nation. Many people on the left and the right going back decades understood that. And as soon as we drop some of these Chicago School of Economics views and apply homegrown theory to our homegrown problems, then the better. When we did, of course, for 2 great periods, under Seddon and then under Savage and on to Fraser, a very great leader, and in the early days of Holyoake, when we did that, we led the world. Right, let me just say one last thing. Sorry, I didn't hear the alarm bell.
Well, you said you were concluding about...
Oh, yeah. Well, I got carried away with myself, actually. The fact is that leadership needs to be realistic, open-minded, and with a clear sense of where the national interest lies. And above all, we've got to, as a country, stop buying into shibboleths and experimentation. What we're talking about, we have managed to achieve with our great resources in 2 great periods in the world's history when we were the leaders. And we can do it again. But we can only do it with the homegrown product that was epitomised by Seddon and then on to John A. Lee, Savage and Fraser, and even to Holyoake's day when he realised the smartest thing to do was to steal the successful party's policies and call them a property-owned democracy. Thank you very much.
you very much, Winston. Now, David Parker.
Thank